The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
A lot of the meaning I see in that in my own life is if I can encourage someone to just keep hoping, and they can pass that hope on to someone, and they can pass that hope on to the next generation, then part of God establishing our work is just the continuation of the encouragement of the body through the generations.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Hannah Hubin is a young writer, poet, and lyricist. Her stage show, All the Wrecked Light, explores Psalm 90 in 3 acts, and it includes 12 songs performed by at least 7 or 8 singer-songwriters or bands, each of whom wrote the music for the lyrics Hannah had written for them. In short, All the Wrecked Light is a marvel of collaboration. Hannah and her team are currently raising funds to turn All the Wrecked Light into a studio album. You can find out more by searching for All the Wrecked Light at Kickstarter.com, or by clicking the link in the show notes. Hannah Hubin, I'm so glad that you are on the Habit Podcast today. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Jonathan. It's an honor.
So you have written and collaborated with a lot of other artists and theologians and pastors and Bible teachers on a project, a stage show that I was very fortunate to know about from the beginning, All the Wrecked Light, where you explore Psalm 90. There's a little bit of T.S. Eliot, the Hollow Men thrown in there. And so I want to talk about that. And you have been a collaborator from way back. Well, I saw something interesting in your bio that I want to read back to you, and I thought from what I know of Hannah, this is just right. So you said. I say you said, it's in third person. One suspects you wrote it and put it in third person. For Hannah, using language as her craft means stewarding both the capacity and the limitations of the written word, finding the fine edge of what writing alone can communicate, and leaning upon other artists for what it cannot. I think it's really interesting. This you being aware of the limitations of what writing can do, and then moving beyond those limitations by connecting with people who do other things besides the written word. Tell me about that.
Yeah. Man, it sounds pretentious when you read it back. I think probably the uglier heart of it is that I've always wanted to be a very independent person who did everything. And it's always been frustrating to me that words can't communicate everything. And I'm not a painter. I'm not a musician. I've tried, and that's just not me. And maybe if I tried harder, I'd get further. I probably would, but they're not intuitive to me. And there's so many forms of art that communicate beyond words that I can't walk in. And that's just a source of frustration for me. And part of what makes me feel better is collaborating with people who can give that sense to my words.
Interesting. You're quite young, and a lot of I think it seems to me unusual that a writer who is as gifted as you, as young as you, is also willing to approach the work with the kind of humility that you're talking about here, and that I think it's really hard for a young artist. I think. But let me just, I guess you should use I statements here. When I was your age, right, it was really hard for me to think of writing or art as outside of, I'm somehow going to prove myself. I'm going to make a name for myself, or I'm going to, show people what I can do. And one thing I've always appreciated about the way you approach what you do is this willingness to, as you said, bring other people in to make what you do better. I mean, do you remember how was there a time when you found it hard to invite other people in because that means they get some of the credit?
Oh, I still find it hard. Sure.
You still find it hard?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I think maybe a lot of that recognition has just come from reading. I grew up reading. My parents gave us a box of books every Christmas, still do. And so I grew up being immersed in a lot of really, really good words, and also recognizing that there were things that words couldn't communicate. Because I read so much and still didn't get the sense that, a piano sonata gives you, or just like Lewis talks about the sound of a waterfall when he talks about longing, and words don't get there. And so I've seen so many writers who are far more experienced than me, far older than me, maybe more gifted than me. Certainly I've spent tons of more time on it, not quite communicating that. And so it would seem really odd for me to think that I could.
Yeah. Wow. Well, it on the one hand, it would seem odd. On the other hand, I think that's what most, especially young writers, think, that they're going to reach a point where, or they I guess I should say, shoot for or desire to do it all with words. So I think it's really interesting that your willingness to say, I'm going to go as far as words will go, and then I'm going to bring in somebody else, which is what you did in this stage show, All the Wrecked Light, and which I was very blessed to be sort of, in one sense, in on the ground floor on, because it was your senior project at New College Franklin. And but as I said in the introduction, when I got introduced, that to say that I was your faculty advisor is a little bit like saying I was Serena Williams' tennis coach, right? She doesn't need a whole lot of coaching. She just needs somebody to sign the paper. But you you rounded up songwriters. So you wrote the lyrics. You brought in songwriters to write the music, and I assume they also get mixed up with the lyric process too.
Very, very little,
Right.
which was really surprising to me. And yeah, we didn't edit a lot of lyrics, and I just attribute that to working with really great musicians who could take whatever I did and kind of give some form to it.
Yeah. Some of these musicians, a lot of them you didn't know ahead of time. You just kind of called them out of the blue and said, "I'm doing this thing. Would you help me?"
Yeah. They were artists that when I was writing the lyrics, I kind of had their music in my head. I knew, this is the sort of style I want for this song. Sometimes I would listen to their music while I was writing the song because that was the field I wanted. And then when I got ready to ask different bands, I just shot a note to them. And they so kindly accepted.
Yeah. I guess, did you have people tell you no? I don't even know you, and I'm not going to collaborate with you?
For sure. There was one set of songs in particular that eventually ended up being picked up by Carousel Rogues and Caitlin Anselmo, who's now producing the album. So I'm glad for all the other folks who said no. But that piece was a mess. I wanted it to be a rap initially, and that wasn't working.
An app?
A rap.
Oh, a rap.
Yeah.
I thought you said an app.
Yeah.
So you really are branching out here.
That one was really frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I put it, that wasn't fair the way I put it. I said, did they tell you I don't know you and therefore I'm not going to collaborate? I'm sure nobody said that to you.
A lot of people just didn't respond.
Yeah. Oh, okay. That makes sense. And so, okay, remind me who are the musicians who collaborated with you on this project?
Yeah. Dennis Parker of Vicky Sticks and Kentucky Thunder. Cardiff State. Ella Mine, St. Dawn in Slumber, which is Ella's instrumental duo with her husband, Isaac. Wild Harbors, Justin Schumacher, and Carousel Rogues.
Okay. All right. Now, the other, you're also collaborating with the Psalmist.
Yeah.
And with T.S. Eliot.
Yeah.
So what do you see as the connection between I'm to say you're collaborating with them. Would you say you were collaborating with the Psalmist and with T.S. Eliot and as you wrote this?
That's a question I've been thinking about a lot lately because I was just a part of something that the Rabbit Room did for Hutchmoot called Pass the Peace, where a painter gave me a painting and then I wrote a poem based on it. And then I wrote a poem and sent it to a painter and he painted it. And there was a lot of conversation about whether or not we could consider that process collaboration because we really weren't talking to each other while we did it. It was more kind of almost like a call and response, like a little bit. And I guess that's very similar to if we're going to call this collaboration with the Psalmist. It's just separated out by a couple thousand years.
Yeah, right.
That he wrote it and I kind of responded to it.
Yeah.
And I think it does work because the end product is created together.
Yeah.
He just didn't know it and it was imperfect.
Yeah, right. Well, I think you're always, whatever you write, you're always entering into a conversation that's been going on a lot longer than you've been there.
Yeah.
And that's the sense I get from, All the Wrecked Light, your show, is that this is, a group of people entering into a conversation that's been going on for a long, long time. And so, one thing I really appreciate about what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm young, but that doesn't mean I don't have anything to contribute to this conversation. And I don't have to, I don't have to be I don't have to know the whole conversation. I don't have to be the loudest voice in the conversation. This is just what I've got to offer right now for this.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful contribution to contribute to the conversation, by the way. And I'm super proud of it. Super proud of you. Since you were my student, I often say I've tried to find ways to take credit for Hannah's brilliance, but now I've just decided I'm just going to take joy instead of trying to take credit. So tell me about Psalm 90. How did you settle on Psalm 90 as what you wanted to devote this much time and energy to?
Yeah. In some ways, I guess I thought about it a lot. And in other ways, I didn't. The night before my high school graduation, I sat down and kind of just was feeling a little overwhelmed by life and wanted to write a prayer. For some reason, writing prayers is just, it's an easier way for me to talk to God sometimes. Write a prayer for the next 4 years of my life. And I had teach us to number our days, that verse from Psalm 90 in my head. And I didn't even know where it came from. But I was like, that's kind of what I want for college. I don't want to lose focus. And so I found the verse in Psalm 90 and read Psalm 90 and thought, well, this is good. This is good stuff for college. And wrote a prayer that I ended up praying pretty consistently those 4 years. So in that sense, I thought about Psalm 90 a lot. And when I got to the end of college and I had to do this project that eventually became All the Light, it seemed as good a place to start as any. But then from the other side of it, I knew the medium I wanted. I knew I wanted to write lyrics, and I knew I wanted to send them to different artists to do the music. And from my own very small experience in art and writing right now, I'm already at a place where I'm not quite sure it matters too much what you choose, what topic you choose. When you're creating something, you pick something and then you gotta stop mining it. And so I had Psalm 90 in my head for the last 4 years and just picked it and trusted the creative process, I guess.
Yeah. Interesting. Do you have any more to say about this idea that maybe it doesn't matter that much which topic you start with? You just mind what you got, what's in front of you?
I think because truth is as everywhere as the created world is. The truth is going to exist when we encounter the created world, and we're not going to be able to avoid the created world.
Yeah.
Seen as both part of it and we're in it.
Yeah.
And so, God's going to reveal himself, and truth and beauty and reality, the way the world works, is going to reveal itself. And that's what we find interesting. I mean, that's what makes good art, is looking at the world in a clear and helpful way.
That's great. And as you pay attention, you look the world to grace, and as you said, the truth reveals itself. I think you just said that. If you just pay attention. So I love. I think that's a very wise way of talking about invention. It is easy to say, I'm just going to sit here and whenever I come up with some brilliant topic, then I'm going to start making something. And do you or do you not believe that the world is shot through with meaning? And if you do, everything is a starting place.
Yeah.
The last verse of Psalm 90 says, one of the phrases there is, I think it's the last verse, establish the work of our hands. What does that mean to you as a person who makes things and collaborates with other people? And tell me about that idea of the prayer, establish the work of our hands.
Yeah, that's I feel like that's kind of the question of Psalm 90, because Psalm 90 is 17 verses, and from or just about 16 of them, the psalmist, who we think was Moses actually, is really emphasizing the de-establishment of the work of our hands, the frailty of man, the temporality of his existence, and anything he does, it's like a very compact and compounded Ecclesiastes, vanity of vanities, all throughout it. And then it ends with establish the work of our hand. And it's either really mean, really sarcastic, or the psalmist is doing something there. And I think in some ways I can lean into that question and acknowledge the possibility that it might be true that God can establish the work we do, and I also really believe that the things God establishes lasts forever. I think I can begin to hope in that because the psalmist has been so honest with me about the things I recognize as true. Because one of the most offensive things you can do to a child is tell them something that they know isn't true. It's just belittling. If a child knows that they did something really poorly and you say, "Oh, that was a really good job," they're going to hate that because they know it wasn't. And people are just grown-up kids. They don't want to be told that everything they do is going to last forever in the way that they want it to, because they know it won't. And like on the Kickstarter page, I say that this was a one-night show, and I want to make it into an album because I want to make it into something lasting. But it's not going to last. We're not even making CDs because people don't even listen to CDs anymore. We're going to put it up on Spotify, and Spotify isn't going to last. Eventually people are going to lose track of it. Hopefully after I die, so I feel better about it. But, it's not going to stick around forever. And the psalmist is really honest about that. So then when he gets to that point, establish the work of our hands, and this is what he's praying and this is what he's hoping for, I'm able to lean into that hope because he's been so honest that that's not going to look like this thing I made always being in this world forever. That there's something the Lord can do that makes what we create more meaningful and more lasting than, honestly, our own bodies.
Do you have any predictions about if as you say, and you're right, this work is going to disappear? Yeah. Someday these Spotify servers will crash.
Yeah.
and this your work, my work, is going to be forgotten about by the citizens of the earth. Yeah. So the prayer, establish our work, is a prayer for what?
I think in the psalm, it's leaning towards resurrection, and that's what I do in the production. There's a lot of connections that the psalmist is making to hope that the Old Testament has in resurrection, and that appears in some of the Hebrew references to mourning that was always associated with resurrection in the Jewish culture. So you have these hints at something coming back to life. And for us in our art and creativity, I think that goes back to what we were talking about, where you said looking the world back to grace, but we're looking at the created world and we're finding what is good and what is true. And because those only come from God, and God is established forever. Anything we can do that works itself back to that is going to last. That part of it's going to last as long as he does.
Yeah. And in the new heavens and in the new earth, the only thing that's going to exist is reality.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, here we've got lots of unreality going on here, and it's the work of the artist to show us reality, and that reality is going to live. whereas the various unrealities, the various falsehoods won't. I love what more than once I've heard Pete Peterson talk about the idea that it is frustrating to be, a human being and be limited, to know that I don't have time, I can only write so many books and I can only, produce so many stage shows, just because, you get 70 or 80 years and then that's it. That's frustrating. But as Pete says, you don't just get 70 or 80 years. Like you've got eternity to continue to create. And when I think about the things we're talking about here, it's hard not to go straight to Leaf by Niggle, from Tolkien. And Niggle as a person who felt like the people around him were keeping him from doing his artistic work, finding out after the fact that that was his work. The people around him were the work, and that, talk about the work of your hands being established, for his little, his artwork to be part of that big tree at the end of I guess that's a spoiler, but, but for Niggle to feel like my work just disappeared, and then to see it in the new creation, is a great encouragement to me.
Yeah. And that's an interesting point when you say that his work was people, because so when I sit down and I think, okay, what does it look like maybe for God to establish the work of an artist? A lot of the meaning I see in that in my own life is, if I can encourage someone to just keep hoping, and they can pass that hope on to someone, and they can pass that hope on to the next generation, then part of God establishing our work is just the continuation of the encouragement of the body through the generations, which makes a lot of sense to me in this world. I don't have a paradigm for what it looks like to make art when people maybe aren't in need of encouragement, like in the new heavens and the new earth. I don't know what that looks like.
So encouragement is a key idea of what you think art is for, and what you're trying to do. I
think so. The offering of hope.
Yeah.
'Cause I think that's what happens when we come up against reality.
Yeah. That's a great, in the new heavens and new earth, there's no faith and there's no hope.
Yeah.
There's love. The greatest of these is love, but faith and hope aren't necessary.
Yeah. And art kind of, if art is a way that we work ourselves to reality and kind of mediates between us, what happens when we're face to face? Like, we don't need that anymore, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, these are deep waters. Okay. Well, tell me what you learned about your own work and about collaboration through the process of collaborating with, some really gifted musicians. And then, you had Michael Card consulting with, in terms of your storytelling and your, actually, I'm not sure what Michael Card was. What was Michael Card doing?
He was one of the 14 folks I met with, either before I started writing or as I was writing, to just consult over the Psalm, over the Hebrew, and then also just, what are the best ways for art to communicate theology.
And you met with Nancy Guthrie and Russ Ramsey and a rabbi or two.
Yep. Some Anglican priests, Dr. Paul Lim, who's a professor at Vandy.
Oh yeah, right.
Great folks.
Yeah. Anyway, that's, by the way, so you're collaborating both in this sort of academic and theological sense, and also in the artistic.
That's correct. Yep.
Sense. Yeah. So,
one thing I suspected when I went into the project, which turned out to be more true than I thought it was going to be, is that it's so much easier to make art when you're not lonely. And so just knowing that, I was going to work on it alone for a week, but then I had this meeting set up with somebody and I was going to tell them, this is where I'm at with the project. These are my questions. These are, some verses I'm struggling with, or some lines I'm struggling with. It's just easier to not be alone. And so in that sense, collaboration feels kind of selfish. Just using my friends to get me through.
Yeah,
that was definitely true. It's going to be pretty hard for me to do a project that's not collaborative. I want to, one of the things I want to do this year is go back to a novel I've been working on. And that's really hard because that's going to be a lonelier project.
Yeah.
Than this was.
Yeah. It is an unavoidable part of the process that you have to go be by yourself.
Yeah.
And do some stuff by yourself.
Yeah.
And, I often put it, you got to go into the cave. But for me, I can't go into the cave unless I know there are people outside the cave who need what I'm bringing, or who are there to help, or who just love me. I can't live in the cave. I'm not that interested in. I mean, I don't know. I know it sort of depends on introvert, extrovert. Kind of some. I know there are people who are much happier in the cave than I am. But I'm I'll go in the cave because you got to do it, and that's where my gifts are. But for crying out loud, I got to know there's people outside. Yeah. Sure. Yeah, so that was part of it for me. Another part of collaboration that was really good was it was just continually humbling, because I was working with people who were older, wiser, had been doing this for years, had been doing things I had never done. People who know Hebrew. I don't know Hebrew. I want to change that, but right now, I was leaning on so many people, and it was really humbling, and it was also really encouraging, because I think that's how the body of Christ is supposed to walk. That's what Paul talks about. If you're the hand, you don't try to do what the foot does. That'd be dumb. And so if I'm, a 21-year-old college kid who doesn't know Hebrew, I'm not going to pretend to know Hebrew. That's not going to help me. I'd rather talk to folks who do. Yeah. Well, good. Well, I love the end result. I loved the process, knowing that you were, finding the limits of what you could do as with the written word, and then moving beyond that through collaboration. I thought that was just showed a lot of wisdom, and I was very encouraged by that whole process. So good on you. I hope this thing does become a studio album, and that it's that the Lord establishes the work of your hands. All right, we've got to wrap up with the question that I always wrap up with, and that is, who are the writers who make you want to write? Hannah. Man. For work like this, songwriting, it goes by genre for me. For songwriting, Rich Mullins has been huge for me. The way he works with lyrics, I think, is really masterful. I don't know enough about music to know the way he works with music, but I know he was great at it, because it resonates with a lot of folks. But I think his metaphors are beautiful and also very earthy. They touch ground. He writes about Kansas because that's what he knew. And I don't know Kansas, but I know the world, the state I'm standing in. And he was just honest. And he got Ecclesiastes and he got Psalm 90. And he knew his work wasn't going to last, and he was honest about that too. So for this stuff like this, probably him. Yeah. How about, who are the poets that make you want to do poets? John Manley Hopkins. The way he works with sprung rhythm and the force behind his words.
he gives me a little bit of hope because I think he really does something musical with his words.
Yeah.
And so that makes me think that maybe words can tap a little bit into the territory of music. In that regard. And that's exciting to me.
Yeah. Words definitely do tap into the territory of music.
Yeah.
No question about that.
Yeah.
Well, great. All right. Well, Hannah Hubin, as I said, may the Lord continue to establish the work of your hands. And I suspect he already is establishing that work. So thanks for being on the Habit Podcast.
Thank you, sir.
This podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. And all our podcasts are made possible by the generous support of our members. To learn more about us, visit rabbitroom.com, and to become a member, rabbitroom.com/donate. Special thanks as well to Taylor Linhart for letting us use her song Diamonds as the theme music for Season 3 of the Habit Podcast. You can learn more about Taylor and follow her work at taylorlinhart.com.
The Habit membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.